Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to walk you through the process of installing Visual Studio and demonstrate the process of setting it up to allow you to create C++ projects, and I'll even create a simple project and show you how to execute your program and so forth. So to begin with, I'm going to go to the Microsoft Store. I think this is the easiest way to get Visual Studio, though you can Google it, go to their website and download it from there as well. So I'll just start typing Visual Studio here, and you'll notice that both Visual Studio Community 2019 and 2022 pop up as options. I'm going to install the 2022 version, and I'll click Install here, and now we're being asked if we want to allow this app to make changes. Obviously, if we're going to install a program, we're going to be making changes, so we need to say yes here, and then continue to allow the installer to do its thing. So it's going to download first the installer and then install it, and then we will use the installer to actually install Visual Studio. So give this a moment here. All right, so within the installer we have several options. Okay, so there are these packages that we can choose from to install with the IDE, which is kind of nice. We probably don't need everything that's available here, and in fact, once upon a time, it took a significant amount of time to install Visual Studio. It was kind of a pain because it was kind of giving you everything, including the kitchen sink. And so we have a little bit more configurability here, which is great. In our case, we're wanting to do, or I'm going to show you rather, how to set it up to do C++ development. And so we're going to select here this option, Desktop Development with C++. So you may have other purposes or needs in mind. So collect the packages or packs that are appropriate to your tasks, and note that you can come back later and add things after you've installed the IDE. So this isn't locking you in or limiting you in any way. So there's no need to just grab everything. Just select the things that you know you're going to need. So in our case, even just selecting desktop development with C++, you'll notice that the total space on our hard drive that's going to be used is about 9.2 gigabytes. So it's sizable, right? Even kind of limiting what we're after here. Now we can get more specific, but I'm just going to go with the standard settings here. Note that I have this setting selected here, install while downloading. That'll speed things up for us. So it tells you that basically if you have like a slow internet connection, you might want to do this differently. You have different options, but we're going to go with install while downloading. That's generally what you're going to want. So we just click install, and we see two progress bars. One is showing us how much has been downloaded, and then of course those things that are downloaded have to be expanded and installed and so forth. And so that's why we have these two progress bars here. I'm going to unclick this box that says start after installation, just because I actually want to go through the process of launching the IDE versus having it kick off itself from inside the installer, because obviously we're not generally going to be running the installer when we want to run the IDE. Now, I'm going to go ahead and speed up time in this video so that you don't have to sit here and watch my relatively slow internet connection do its thing. I'll talk to you in a moment. All right. So with that done, we're ready to actually launch the IDE and take a look at the process of creating a project and executing it. I have to comment, I was chuckling at myself as that download was happening. I mentioned my relatively slow internet connection and then realized that the speeds that were being reported during the download were literally on the order of about 1,000 times faster than was available when I was a kid. So oh, how things change and how spoiled we can become, right? At any rate, let's go ahead. I'm going to exit the installer instead of launching the IDE from here so that we can go through the whole process. So a couple of ways that we could get to the IDE. Of course, we could click on the start menu here and go through our apps and find it. And there it is. Or alternatively, we can just start typing Visual Studio in the search bar and get access to it that way. So either way is fine. Once it starts up, you may want to pin it to your taskbar. That's totally up to you. Now at this point it's asking you to sign into your Microsoft account if you have one, or you can create an account, or we can skip that step, which is what I'm going to do for now. I don't need to do any of these things for the purpose of this demo, so we'll just skip this. Now we get to choose our color theme. Dark is the correct answer in case you were wondering, and we will start Visual Studio. Now, when the application starts up, you'll see a menu here on the right that gives you the option of doing things like cloning a repository, creating a new project, and so forth. And then you'll notice here on the left, eventually, it took a bit there, will be a list of pre-existing projects or solutions that you may have been working on beforehand. So you see that I was fiddling around with this a little bit earlier today, and so I have a couple of things in this list. If this is the first time you've installed Visual Studio, this will be empty. Now what we want to do is create a new project, and we have a couple of options. There are lots of options here. For our purposes today, I'm just going to be demonstrating a simple C++ program, so I could choose between an empty project or a console app. Okay, in both cases, I can set up an application that will run in the Windows terminal. That's kind of what I'm after. So normally if I was doing a console app such as that, I would click here and then go next. In this case, I'm actually going to go with empty project, the reason being that the console app just gives you kind of some boilerplate code to start with, source file and so forth. And I actually want to demonstrate that part of the process as well, since it's going to be highly likely that at some point you're going to want to create additional source files, etc. So we'll just start from scratch here, and I'll say next. Now we have the option of naming our project. I'm going to call it Simple Hello World. And you'll notice also that it's populating this solution name down here. Now, in Visual Studio, there's something called a project and there's something called a solution. You can kind of think of your project as a program that you're creating with its source files and so forth. A solution can contain more than one project, and so that's why we have these two different things. So you might have some large task you're doing that actually requires multiple projects, and so Visual Studio makes it kind of easy for you to organize that. The solution that is created, there's actually a file called a solution file. This contains the information that's necessary for the IDE to build your project or projects and so forth, and it does a lot of the automation that makes an IDE nice in the first place. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and place the solution and project in the same directory, so that solution file will be in the same location as the rest of my project and so forth. Now here we have an option to set the location, and I am going to go ahead and change this a little bit. So instead of placing it in my home folder inside of a folder called source, I'm going to put it inside of my documents folder within a folder called repos. Now, you can kind of put it wherever you'd like, put your projects wherever you'd like, but take note of where you're placing them so that if you need to go find files later, that's easy enough for you to do. All right, we'll go ahead and hit create. Give it a moment to do its thing. And here we are. So we've got this tab with some news and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and close that for now. And on the right, you'll see my Solution Explorer. And so within this solution, we see the specific project I've created, Simple Hello World. Again, we can have multiple projects in the same solution. That's not what we're doing in this case. So within this project, we see several things. It's organized, you'll note, with separate locations for header files, resource files. These might be images, data files, and so forth, as well as source files. So we'll typically put our .h or header files under this location, and we'll put our source files here. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we need is a file. So if I right click on the project itself, then I have the option to add things to the project. Okay, now it's important that I add to the project versus simply creating a file. If you create a file, it'll exist, but it won't be included in the project, and thus it won't be included when the project is built properly and so forth. Add will allow you to add new items, which is what we're going to do in this case, or existing items. So if you already have a source file, maybe it belonged to a different project, or you accidentally created the file and didn't add it to the project, you can add it here. In our case, again, we're going to create a new item. So we'll click there and we have several options again. So we can create a CPP file, a header file, or a C++ class. If we're creating a class, then when we click here, we'll actually automatically get both the .cpp file and the .h file. So that's pretty nice if you need that in the future. For now, we're just going to do a .cpp file, and then please note that down here we can set the name. I'm going to call it main.cpp, and we'll say add. All right, so now you see that main.cpp has been added to my project, and it's listed under source files. I'm just going to create a really simple program that says hello world. Whoops. To do so, I'll need to include IOStream. My brain was getting ahead of my fingers. Or I should say my fingers were getting ahead of my brain. And so undoubtedly you've seen this all before. And there we are. We have a very simple Hello World program ready to be compiled and executed. So how do we do that? Well, we have options up here to build and so forth, or we can click this green arrow, which will both build the program if it needs to be built and then run it. If it's already been compiled, then it'll just go ahead and run it. But if we've made changes since the last compilation, this will both compile and then execute our code. When we click that button, you'll note that it pops up this output pane down on the bottom, or output window, whatever you want to call it, which in this case ultimately culminated in a terminal window being opened up where my program was able to execute. Once the program reaches the end of execution, we get this message here, and we can press any key in order to close the window. Now, sometimes we want to do input, and just to demonstrate that that will still work the way you expect, I will simply say, please enter a number, and we will create a variable called number, initialize it to 0, and then we will read that value into the variable number. Now, obviously after this we could do whatever we want with it. I'm simply trying to demonstrate that we can actually read values as well. So now you'll notice that instead of just running through to the end of the program, our program is paused, sitting there waiting for input on that line that we were using C in. So I will enter a number, hit enter, and now you'll note that the program runs to completion and we're back where we were before. Okay, that's about it for this video. We've demonstrated installing the Visual Studio IDE, creating a C++ project, and actually executing our code. Until next time.